I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
So welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 86th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, where we talk all about Star Trek, old and new. And tonight we have a double feature. We're talking about our two new short Trek episodes that are out for this season of short Treks. They are Q&A and The Trouble with Edward.
First two of 6, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, and we're going to be getting another one in November, 2 more in December, and then 1 in January, right before Season 1 of Picard is set to premiere. So we have Star Trek every month for a good long while, until the Picard season finale.
It's pretty cool, although the short Treks have a somewhat mixed record, I think, between the two of us. I think I overall like the first season better than you did, with its 4 episodes.
Yeah.
But you found a fair amount to like.
Yeah, and I really loved the fourth and final one last year with Harry Mudd. Thought that was a lot of fun. I had a good time seeing Saru's backstory. Mm-hmm.
I think I could agree that there were some missed opportunities, but all of them are kind of fun little ways to revisit some of your favorite characters in between. Let's see, they also had the one last season, which. Did it ever come to fruition? The one with the sentient discovery
with craft in the future?
Yeah.
No.
And I was like, that was the one that seemed like the most obvious link to last season of Discovery, with its future hopping and super AI stuff going on.
Alex Kurtzman was asked a couple weeks ago at New York Comic Con if we would see season 3 Discovery connect with that. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't know, maybe. Or something along those lines. So.
All right. Well, maybe they're keeping that one in reserves, or maybe they don't have anything planned yet, but they want to leave the door open.
Sure.
And that was just a super lame answer. Oh, well.
Yeah. But yeah, enough about that. We're talking about these two, both of them set within the time of Discovery, or around that same time, dealing with the crew of the USS Enterprise under the command of the one and only Captain Christopher Pike.
Yeah.
I say the one and only, even
but more like the foreign only, or whatever.
He's been played by a bunch of different actors.
Yeah.
But yes.
I kind of all of which I kind of like.
No, my favorite was the guy who was just sitting in the wheelchair in the original series.
Was that not the main?
No, that wasn't Jeffrey Hunter.
It wasn't Jeffrey Hunter?
No, that's why they scarred up his face, so they could have a different actor.
I thought they scarred up his face because he got scarred.
No.
A little bit of magic has just left my life. No, that actually just means that they did a good job of making me think that was Jeffrey Hunter in scarred makeup. So good job, original Star Trek TOS makeup team. Of course, we're going to get to see the current Pike in both of these ones.
Yes, Anson Mount.
Although he is not a lead in either of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. The most popular character who fans are demanding get his own show takes a back seat. But
do we know if he is going to be the lead in any of these?
I don't know. Maybe the next one we get.
Huh. Well, should we dive in on Q&A?
Sure. So the first one on deck, Q&A. This one stars Rebecca Romijn and Ethan Peck as Number One and Spock, respectively. The episode was written by Michael Chabon, who had previously written Calypso, and is now the showrunner of Star Trek Picard. And the episode was directed by Mark Pellington.
Okay. Is anybody in one of the regular disco directors or anything, do we know?
No, this is actually the first time he directed any Star Trek, but he does have an existing Star Trek credit in Season 2 of Discovery, The Sound of Thunder, with the Ba'ul, when we see...
The backstory, or this is the one where the Kelpians shed their They're ganglia.
They're ganglia, yeah. The predator species on the planet of Kaminar was actually... They have that really creepy voice. And that was actually director Mark Pellington doing that voice.
So do you think that he was just a voice actor for Scary Monsters, and they're like, we like that so much, we'd like you to direct an episode where Spock meets Number One?
I think he's a guy who knows people who work on Discovery, and they hooked him up with these 2 jobs.
Fair enough. So this episode is sort of Spock's first day on the Enterprise, right?
Yeah, this is Ensign Spock, fresh out of the Academy. Dave, why don't you give us a quick summary of this? It's only 15 minutes to summarize, so I think you can handle it.
All right. Well, I didn't plan on this at all, so let's see what I can do on the spot. We get a slightly overinflated Spock transporting to the Enterprise to make it feel very momentous, whereupon he is immediately met by Number One, who tells him that she expects of the science officer that he should be bombarding everyone around them with questions until they're annoyed with them. He reluctantly begins doing this with kind of a little coercion from her, and they're on their way up to the bridge in the turbolift, aka the elevator. Isn't that what they call it?
Dr. McCoy called it elevator in Star Trek 2. Who's holding up the damn elevator?
All right, well, that's an old country guy doing it. So, and then you have in the classic sort of, I guess, bottle episode style of TV shows, you have the 2 of them trapped in the elevator, needing to entertain themselves, Spock continuing to ask questions, her telling him, like, things that reveal things about her, things about him. They get to know each other a little bit more deeply than expected. There's even, at least visually, a little hint of romance or some sort of close connection.
There's going to be some sexual tension with two hot single people trapped in a small private enclosed space.
I actually don't think that it had to have happened. They chose to do it. But Spock has been a little bit acknowledged.
If I was stuck in an elevator with Rebecca Romaine, the thought might cross my mind.
Spock is not you. Spock has actually, I guess I would say, always been a sexual creature, even going back to TOS. But over time, especially since the Kelvinverse movies, they've been a little bit more open, acknowledging that the character had sex appeal among fandom, and it's okay to acknowledge that he might have sex appeal amongst his contemporaries. So that is something that kind of is a little bit of an undercurrent near the end of the episode, and it culminates with them getting to the bridge of the Enterprise, meeting Pike for the first time, and a little bit of shared secret connection between Spock and Number One, as the episode fades to black. What do you think? Seem all right?
You're, great job.
All right, thanks.
What was your general reaction to this episode?
All right, so I just want to say I have to get one thing out right out of the gate. I want Star Trek to stop trying to make Gilbert and Sullivan happen. Just give it up, Star Trek. We know that you all have a boner for it. But we would all, the rest of Star Trek fandom, even if we like it, and it's okay, Gilbert and Sullivan, would like any musical but that. but that one. And maybe even any song. Well, they did do some different ones. They did a different one in, what was it, Star Trek Insurrection. Had a different Gilbert and Sullivan tune.
That was like what is it, a British tar? What is it?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Tar?
A tar is like some kind of like a dignitary or something like that.
A British tar is a soaring soul, as free as a mountain bird, or something.
Yeah,
so that's what a British tar is.
Yeah, I think you're about right there. Also sung by Sala in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, I was like that when I saw that in the theater in '98. I was like, oh, it's the song from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yep.
Because I was a stupid hillbilly kid who didn't know what Gilbert and Sullivan
were.
If
Star Trek didn't keep trying to make people love it, and I feel like it showed up in TNG somewhere, although I'm not 100% sure.
But it is this idea of where they don't want to use stuff that's too modern because it'll feel dated. So they make all of their pop cultural references be to things that...
They love the classics.
Yeah, it has to be something that like existed before TOS came out.
Right. You perform Hamlet, or you read detective novels from the 30s. Something that is very clearly in the past for the people who started watching Star Trek in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or whatever.
Yeah. And it makes it come off as strange that we don't get many references to more recent pop culture that would even be in the future of our time, but in the past of Star Trek's time, or even things of the latter half of the 20th century or 21st century.
Yeah,
but
it's a little bit odd, and also it was the whole point of that was to number one was expressing that she's like, hey, I've got some quirkiness in me too, some individualism that I see that you too have, Spock, some strangeness, and that then she just starts singing randomly. It felt there's some messages in here. I guess I'll come back to this in a minute that I actually kind of felt were a little anti-Star Trek, even though this is a lightweight episode with a lot of sort of fun dialogue. I liked the actors interacting, and Spock being a little uncomfortable as number one kind of walks him through all these questions. On a surface level, I liked it. Then I went back and watched it again, and I was like, there's actually a few things in here that I feel are like bad Star Trek messages. What was your, just tell me your first impressions, though.
The first time I watched it, I thought it was okay, I guess. I didn't have a strong dislike of it, but I also didn't really plug into it that much. Most of the things that I thought were interesting in there was some of Michael Chabon he's self-admittedly like a long-time Star Trek fan who enjoys there being a deep, rich canon continuity for him to draw things from.
Like Spock's raised voice from the early episodes of TN, well, literally the premiere Lost episode.
There were a few episodes where he's shouty Spock.
Right.
Shouty in the Carbonite maneuver, he's shouty in Where No Man Has Gone Before, he's shouty in The Cage. Mm-hmm. But, and also like the fact that he smiles, which Discovery Season 2 also used a little bit, that there was a time when Spock did smile. Yeah. I kind of had a good time with like some of that stuff.
Agreed.
And I love seeing the Enterprise sets. They do an outstanding job with the bridge and the corridors.
Well, one thing I noticed in the corridors, and they've probably done this before, and I don't know if I've commented on this or not, but that sort of slight grill work that runs along the angular side thing. Yeah, it's kind of cool to see that, because that seems like one of those things that honestly feels dated.
Well, they had that in TOS.
Right, but it feels dated now to see it. But they did do it in such a way that I just think it looks like it works in a contemporary style. I think it's a good example of mixing something that's a 60s probably budgetary limit and making it kind of seem pretty cool and modern.
We get a reference to Captain Pike and his horse.
Oh yeah, remind me that. So Spock says, "Tell me the 3 most salient facts about Christopher Pike," and that's part of the third one. But just to real quick run through the others. The first one is something about he's quick to change, quick to change his opinion, but he's always open.
He'll hear you out, and he'll change his mind if he agrees with you.
The other one was about him being a decorated Starfleet warrior, essentially.
Yeah. Which that was weird to me, but we do know he had a bunch of decorations from Discovery Season 1. He was on that list that Saru pulled up of the most decorated.
Right.
It's weird that he's the most decorated in combat, and yet he sat out the war with the Klingons. You'd think that's the guy you would need.
Right. Well,
they have their explanation for that.
They had their explanation. But and then the third interesting fact about him was that
he's never sentimental except for with his horse, who we know from TOS is named Mango.
Yep. I couldn't remember much about the horse from that.
Mango or Tango?
Does he have a flashback in that?
Yeah, remember
the Telosians?
They're out
the picnic?
Yeah, they're the picnic back on Earth.
Okay.
Mojave, which isn't a desert anymore. It's like a city. It's like it was Gene Roddenberry's vision of like a utopia.
Yeah.
Earth.
Right. Even Mojave is going to become something beauul.
Yeah, it's a great place to have a picnic.
Yeah, that's a nice subtle idea of his. So that actually kind of brings something up. That she kind of reeled those off. It sounded a little like, and the whole episode feels a little scripty to me, a little writery. Like the actors did a good job of making.
How does this make you feel about Star Trek Picard? If this is the showrunner.
I mean, I don't know if I have a lot to go on, but like the one or two things that were issues for me, which I don't know if we should jump into them and I should bring them up, or right now or not, but. It's interesting because it was very watchable, and yet, like, I felt like they were delivering like Michael Chabon's lines. Like it didn't feel.
Did you feel that way about Calypso also?
Those weren't the pre-existing characters. They did, but my one complaint about Calypso was that it didn't feel very Star Trek. So, by throwing it so far in the future and having people who were not, they didn't have allegiance to Starfleet and the Federation. So it was really kind of a science fiction story that happened to take place on the Discovery. So, yeah, I guess it does make me a little trepidatious. For all Chabon's accolades, it is possible that I won't find him a good fit for Star Trek. I don't know.
But I do like that he likes to do things like have Spock's serial number from episode Court Martial, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it's like the same serial number. It's like, oh, well, he cared enough to look that up.
There's for sure some thoughtfulness, and maybe even like his approach may be one that kind of wins me over eventually. Yeah. But it just felt a little, at the very least, different. I liked the opening, by the way, when before he beams over.
Oh, that beautiful transporter room set.
It had a little bit of a, how like in Smallville they needed to make every reference to that one day he'll become Superman have some meaningful thing. And they weren't doing that quite, but they definitely wanted to make out like, this is the first time Spock is transporting to the Enterprise. It should feel momentous. And like the camera does these like loving pans over like his ears and, like his badge and stuff like that. Sort of iconic qualities of Spock. And I don't mind it. This is, it's okay to like have some reverence for the fact that this character became iconic. But I think you and I both noticed the music did something interesting. It begins, of course, with the familiar strains of, was it Alexander Courage? Is to do the Star Trek theme?
Yeah, but they've used that in Discovery a lot.
Right, and so a nostalgic vibe. I always like hearing it, to be honest. But there's a bit of music in there that sounded like the musical stamp of Michael Giacchino from the Kelpin movies. That really bold bum 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 bum.
Right before the main theme kicks in.
Right.
If you watch Star Trek 09, you can hear it when McCoy and Kirk are in the shuttlecraft approaching the Enterprise, and McCoy says, "Jim, you've got to see this."
Right.
Right before you get like the main theme, and like bum 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 bum.
It was interesting because I haven't seen Giacchino stuff fused. I mean, I guess they did use some of those strains in of TOS,
but he's actually credited in here as a supervising producer, or something like that.
And if he's had a role before, I hadn't noticed it. So that's just kind of interesting if he might be on board or playing some role in future.
Well, we know that he's it was actually a supervising composer. But we know that he is working on some CBS All Access stuff now because he actually directs one of the 2 animated short treks that we're getting in December.
Right. Hey, I've got a quick question about number 1. I know as originally conceived, she was going to be the Spock-like character talking about in TOS. Now, as presented on Discovery, and she didn't have a ton to do in the cage, but as presented on Discovery, she feels pretty outgoing, chatty even at times. Are you okay with that change from at least the character as they were described on paper?
I don't really see it being anything that contradicts what we saw in TOS.
Right. It was really more that some of my knowledge is really just that behind the scenes stuff. It wasn't on the screen much.
I like that she likes spicy food.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's a thing for her.
Wasn't it like a habanero hot sauce that she put on her hamburger and French fries? Mm-hmm. I can forgive the Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the reason why they decided to make that be the freaky thing about her, and I thought that was weird, the use of the word freaky.
Yeah, she said something like, you're going to have to lose the freak, or something like that.
You got to hide the freaky if you're going to make command.
Yeah.
But that's actually Rebecca Romijn, knew how to sing that, going into this. So that's why they wrote that in there.
Interesting.
But on that
that's a behind the scenes thing too, though. You're only accepting it because you know that little bit of trivia about her. Otherwise, it's kind of obnoxious.
Well, I'm just we like to share trivia with our
but you said you were excusing it.
Well, no, it just helps explain it.
Sure.
But on that point,
I guess Riker playing the trombone is like him having some small facility.
You know, that kind of screwed over Garrett Wong on Voyager because they wanted Harry Kim to play a musical instrument, and he doesn't know how to play any musical instruments, and they told him like, "Well, just learn how to play the clarinet." And they're like, Jonathan Frakes played the trombone, so I don't see what the big deal is. But he's like, no, that's because Jonathan Frakes knew how to play the trombone before you gave him the job. But
you know what it made Harry Kim infinitely cooler if he's like, if he had been like, well, I play the electric guitar. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, well, maybe one day we'll get a Star Trek character who plays the guitar. But back to this conversation between Number One and Spock.
Yep.
This is where she points out that like, oh, you want to make command someday, and he denies it at first.
Right.
I like that they acknowledge that because we do know that Spock eventually becomes captain of the Enterprise.
I would say
Star Trek 2.
The vibe I got throughout TOS was not that he was on track for command. He did not seem like he was filled with ambition. But yes, the history does show us that by the time the movies roll along, he does assume command, and it actually feels like the kind of thing that he might have come to realize over years of serving with Captain Kirk. And so I like that too. I think that's a reasonable thing for her to pick up on. Shows how that she can read people, and she does it like before he knows it himself.
And we see him command his first mission in Galileo 7.
Goes great.
Well, there's kind of some implications in there that he's
got a bit to learn.
Yeah, but he thought himself capable of being the leader, and then learns that maybe not quite so much.
Right.
But he goes through an arc, and then he ends up like saving them at the end with his desperate move.
Yeah, for sure. That was kind of another story in Galileo 7 about them. That was like about cultural differences.
About people being stranded together temporarily.
Yeah, that's just true.
But yeah, we don't get many other characters. We do have Pike at the end. We do have a voice from the engineer Upjohn, who weirdly sounds Scottish. Also, like Scotty.
I couldn't tell if that was like inside joke or if that was like, was I like, do I forget some character from The Cage and that's just a tribute to them?
Yeah, I think that's the only Upjohn that we know of in Star Trek.
When he shows up in the turbolift or in the transporter room, and she's like, "I expect my science officers to be asking all these questions, and you haven't asked a single one in the 30 seconds we've been talking. What's wrong with you?" I thought that was a very artificial line.
Yeah, it felt like you had 15 minutes to write your story, and so you got to like cram something in there to move things along right off the bat.
Yeah,
and it didn't feel real.
It felt very artificial. I don't mind that she like come up with this notion like, start asking me questions, let me fill you in on as much as possible. But yeah, the way it happened was kind of a little bit hokey. And so I'm going to mention a few things that kind of bugged me in there. One was that he said, how do you feel about some theory that the Prime Directive is immoral?
I like that.
She said something like, that question is just like a can of worms, and she's like, I suggest that you move on from it. I hated that because this is a perfect opportunity to address.
You thought she was too flippant?
Yeah, and to address at least on a surface level that it should be open to question. If she had said something like, that's a bigger question for another day, we could talk about it for hours, but yes, it has some issues. Like if they had said something like that, I would have been perfectly happy with it. But she's like, stop. She literally told him to keep asking questions until, and then he's like, asked a serious one, and she's like, move next. And I'm like, it's the most serious question he asked.
Yeah, but I looked at it as, first of all, like I like that Spock, this younger Spock, fresh out of the academy, would still be questioning
a little bit of a Hellraiser.
Like well, not so much a Hellraiser, but the fact that like he has some doubts, he has questions.
Sure.
And, which is like a thing with younger people in a lot of cases. And with her being the older, more seasoned, possibly even grizzled, Starfleet veteran,
she looks pretty good for grizzled.
I could see her being the type who would be like, yeah, I'm not gonna get into this with someone who's fresh out of the academy and doesn't know their head from their ass. Mm-hmm. They're literally on their first assignment. Just like, you don't even worry about that right now. Like,
it felt anti-intellectual to me, anti-Star Trek. I did not like it.
But I think this is also a limitation of the the 15-minute format of the short film, which I love this notion of doing an anthology of short films. I think that's a good idea. It adds some value to keeping your CBS All Access subscription year-round when there's no new shows on. However, I have been kind of underwhelmed with the short treks overall. If you count short treks as a Star Trek TV show, it's easily my least favorite Star Trek show.
Right. And I think I liked season 1 more than I'm liking season 2 so far.
Yeah, you mentioned that, I believe.
But, we're 1/3 of the way through. We'll see what happens. So here was the other one that I didn't like, and this is jumping back to what we talked about earlier, which was her telling him, like, I forget what led her to ask this, but it was when she recognized that he was on the command track, and she said, you're going to have to hide your weirdness, and he said, well, I've been doing that all my life, talking about his Vulcan human heritage stuff.
It definitely ties into what we saw in Discovery Season 2, with all the flashbacks.
And she said, it can be painful, and he said something like, I know. And I was like, what is this message sending? I do not like Starfleet saying... Now, I know that not everybody can be some wild... quixotic Doctor Who doctor kind of character. That's not what you wanted a captain, maybe. But and she's kind of trying to advise him. But Michael Chabon decided the themes for the first episode. He raised this, and that the central theme is don't reveal who you are. It's going to hurt you, but keep doing it. Ugh.
Yeah, this is a weird way to if you take this short out of context. I definitely see that problem in there.
Even afterwards, after they share their little secret and she has her moment that's fun, she said, this never happened. Yeah. What, you're going to get drummed out of Starfleet for singing Gilbert and Sullivan? No. You're only going to get drummed out of my apartment.
Yeah, I would have had a better time. It would have been more satisfying if there's something at the end where they're kind of oh no, we can we can do this cool fun stuff together, and we don't have to hide who we really are. Yeah, I would have felt more Star Trekian.
Honestly, if she had said something like, maybe don't do it on the bridge, but she's like, I'll meet you in the rec room this weekend, and we'll knock out a few tunes in space karaoke or something like that.
Yeah, Michael Chabon, you should have done that.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know that I have much more to say about it. Like I said, in retrospect, I was kind of disappointed in it, even though... on the surface, I liked the ride, and I thought the actors did a great job with it. And I liked how it was filmed, because filming inside a turbolift is not an easy thing to make interesting.
I do have to talk about how I hate the interior of the turbolift shaft. How that makes no sense with...
Now, you're talking about when they show the exterior shots.
Yes.
Not interior, but really exterior.
Of the car going through the rails like a roller coaster or something.
It'd be like as if the camera was camera's outside gliding around among the ship's innards and watching the tube.
Yeah, but there's no way for that to fit inside of the ship.
Yeah.
We've actually seen schematics of the Enterprise and seen where the turbo lift shafts are, and they don't work like this at all. And even if you take in mind that this is a slightly different Enterprise with a kind of a visual overhaul, maybe it goes through a big refit between here and the original series. I don't know. But even then, with the size of this ship, it still doesn't make sense. It's whack.
Didn't they do it on some other episode?
They did it on Discovery a couple times, and I hated it then, and I hate it here, and they need to abandon this like they abandoned the Season 1 Klingon look in Discovery.
I'm right there with you. I don't think I particularly bothered me too much, because I just took it as this is, I guess, just a stylized way to show its movement in the ship and give you some vague sense of scale. But it didn't add anything. I don't need to see the interior guts of the Enterprise.
You know what would have been better, instead of spending your CGI money on that?
Yeah.
Is show us an exterior shot of the Enterprise. They should have done that at the very beginning of the episode. You had an exterior shot of the Enterprise. You had some other ship. Maybe something that kind of looks like, I don't know, I was going to say, maybe you could use, the...
what he was beaming over from?
Yeah, but I was going to say, maybe you could use, the warp sled from the motion picture, something that looks like that.
Yeah.
A Vulcan
something that would have been, a cool Easter egg, but also appropriate.
Yeah, maybe he went from, the Academy back to Vulcan to visit his mom, and now he's coming to the Enterprise or something. I don't know.
Well, I will say, the next one that we're going to talk about begins with a shot of the Enterprise that I thought was a beautiful shot.
Yes.
So, yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, and the next short that we talk about, I definitely love the look of it so much.
Are we ready to jump in there? Yeah, do you have any final thoughts about Q&A?
I would just say, I thought it was okay, I guess. Maybe leaning slightly towards, the lower end of okay.
Yeah. I'm in a weird place because I think it's like well made, but like it has things in it that like I hate if I think about them much at all. And Star Trek kind of, for me at least, begs to be thought about at least a little bit.
One last thing I hate is when they pull them out with that little handheld device that number one just grabs onto and holds onto, and it pulls her up with the rope, like Batman's grappling gun from 1989.
Yep.
That is so ridiculously unsafe. Like, why wouldn't you have like a harness that like you just let her strap into?
No, I wonder. There was something in there that I wondered if it was a weird continuity thing. They said that they were looking for some kind of harness or something, but they said it's been missing since some incident or something like that. And I was like, man, that to me sounds like a reference to like a previous episode. Not that there were any episodes prior to the cage, but I wondered if it was some reference to like a novel or a comic or something. But I don't know. We might want to look into it because I feel like they might have indicated that there was something that they were going to use and then they used something else instead.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm also super annoyed that I couldn't turn on the closed captions on here.
I tried to do that too. I wanted to catch some names on one or two of these and I couldn't turn them on.
CBS All Access, fix your shit and let me read the closed captions.
Yeah.
I
we want to know who the names of the characters are.
Yeah. But yeah, so
They did mention her name as Una, by the way. I guess that makes it formally canon.
Well, they did that in Discovery Season 2.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, Pike said it.
Fair enough.
But the closed captions were wrong. They had it written as like, and, like when Pike is
like they phonetically did it.
But it was a goof. But anyways, we shall move on to our next short, The Trouble with Edward. And this one was written by Graham Wagner and directed by Daniel Gray Longino.
Graham Wagner. He's got to write it.
Yeah.
So that's the name I should remember for my hate mail.
Yeah, I think these were both first-time Star Trek contributors.
Okay.
And Dave probably hopes last time.
I'm hoping.
I think you hated this.
Yep. My favorite things are like... I feel like for about like 3 or 4 minutes, I was on board it. Because it begins with that beautiful shot of it like in like the shadow of a planet. So it's kind of the Enterprise is darkened, but there's but it has like, you know, it's running lights and the windows and all that stuff on. And it looks beautiful. And they're rendezvousing with another ship because one of the crew members has been promoted. And she's going to assume the captaincy of a smaller science vessel.
The USS Cabot.
Cabot? What's her name? The new captain?
Lucero.
Lucero. I wanted to get a better sense of who that was, so I tried to turn on the closed captions, and I couldn't.
Well, the captions work on this one.
Did it?
They do now. I don't know.
Okay. I think when I tried it, it didn't work.
But they don't work on the other one.
Yeah.
At least for me.
But I was like, I thought the special effects looked great in those opening shots.
The two ships look beautiful side by side. And again, I love these interiors. When we cut to Pike and Lucero walking down the Enterprise corridor.
Interiors look great. I liked Pike seeing her off. I liked her. I liked the sense that Starfleet is an evolving thing and that people do get promoted and they get cool, you know, captaincies of ships. And that there was a few jokes about her getting a smaller ship, but obviously she was going to be a good fit for it. And Pike's enthusiasm for her with a little bit of gentle ribbing about, he's like, well, I guess it's supposed to be slightly prescient. He's like, they'll eat you alive out there. And, cause they're going to go to a section that's on the border of like the Klingon Empire. And there is a food problem. And so he made a sort of joke. He's like, they're going to eat you alive out there. And then he's like, I'm just kidding. You're going to do great.
Well, I thought he was talking about like her crew.
Yeah, but that was like, clearly a little bit of a little foreshadowing. I think it is maybe about the crew, but it definitely also serves as foreshadowing. Anyway, right about once she transfers over, I guess that's when I stopped liking it.
I had a better time watching this. I still think that it got a little too silly in a few places, and where I thought Q&A was like okay on maybe the negative side of okay.
Yeah.
I think this is okay leaning on like the positive side.
Okay.
I did.
Oh, by the way, seeing her when she first gets over and you see her talking to doing her mission briefing.
Do you want to go through the summary of this one, or do you want me to take it?
Oh yeah, I forgot we even do summaries on these ones. You take it. Yeah. Okay. So you do this one.
So Lucero beams over to the Cabot, and she gets to know her new crew. And they're all a bunch of eager, wide-eyed scientist ready to make the galaxy a better place with science.
Yep.
Except for this one slacker named Edward.
Yep.
Edward Larkin. Or is it Larkin Edward? It's Edward Larkin. And he seems to be a bit of a...
Barclay? But without the morality?
He's definitely a weirdo.
Yeah.
They're trying to solve a problem with food shortage on a planet. And he says, oh, there's this animal called the tribble. They're really tasty if you shave all the hair off, but they breed slow. So I'm going to make them breed faster and we'll have a lot of food. And everyone is like, oh, that sounds really dumb. You're an idiot. And he's kind of butthurt that they don't like his plan. So he goes through with it anyways. He genetically alters a tribble and it begins rapidly reproducing. Not unlike what we saw in The Trouble with Tribbles or Trials and Tribulation.
They just give it some fancier visuals, so you occasionally see them. Not occasionally, you see them. The new tribbles being born.
Yes, but they reproduce at such an uncontrollable rate that the ship is overran with tribbles, and Lucero and the crew have to abandon ship, except for Edward because he's an idiot and stays behind
and gets engulfed by like a wall of tribbles.
Yeah, and somehow the tribbles make it to the planet, which has to be evacuated, and now we have a world of super breeding tribbles, which I guess this is to explain the origin of the tribbles that no one really asked for.
I had an existential crisis watching this episode.
Jesus.
I felt like I hated every single addition it made to the tribble continuity, which I've seen little bits and pieces of in other places, and I've liked them before. I hated them all so much over something that I know the tribbles are trivial in the overall scheme of things, that it did make me worried about everything about Star Trek Discovery's future. Like, I am not, I'm not a big continuity guy. I don't worry too much about it. But then I was like, I hated everything they did with it, from giving the tribbles a formal name and saying tribbles was the shortened version of it.
Oh, that didn't bother me.
To his, like, creepy...
What's wrong with that? Why is that a problem?
It was just unnecessary.
This seems a little nitpicky.
All right, sure, it's nitpicky, I guess, but it was like it was getting off on a bad foot.
Okay.
His first of all, I would think, I know this was a comedy episode, and but like it felt to me like an Orville episode, because their discussion of what to do didn't feel like actual Starfleet stuff where they might be talking, I would assume, about like a lot of synthesized foods and things like that, and genetically modified stuff. The notion that they would literally just be making little food bags out of these, and I know he's supposed to be a crazy dude,
yeah,
but they at least like somewhat hear him out, and that this goes through.
She shuts him down pretty fast.
I guess so, but like I would have liked for her to have said, Starfleet does not we don't even eat like meat or like raise food that way.
Meat. They do eat meat in Star Trek.
Yeah, I actually think they should retcon that so that they go ahead and have like artificial versions of stuff like that. But that's a sort of separate side discussion. But I don't know, like all the stuff he even talked about, like she's worried about whether they're sentient or not, and he's like, I can make them dumb, which I guess he does too. So they are. Mentally demoted.
Anything that I think his DNA goes into is going to be dumb because.
Oh right, and it's his DNA, so it's like he fucked a tribble. Oh my god, and that made this is in Memory Alpha right now. Is that tribbles are the result of this dumb fucking shorts episode
of the guy from Bob's Burgers.
The guy from Bob's Burgers is the guy who invented tribbles. I'm too disgusted to go on, Father. You talk about some things you liked about it. You were just having more fun with it than I did, right?
Yeah. Some of the jokes I thought were funny. Some of the jokes I thought fell flat. And it did get goofier than I would have preferred. Mm-hmm. Some of the things I liked seemed to be more. I don't know, more of the surface level stuff. Like I loved the uniforms they're wearing. We do get a new version of the uniforms during the conference scene at the beginning that don't have like the black collar at the top.
Yeah.
And I thought those looked really cool, more in line with TOS.
I agree, those look good.
It's weird that in Star Trek uniforms are not uniform anymore. I kind of liked seeing how the Tribbles had like a little bit of animation to them, where they would have some movement sometimes. But they still look like the big fur balls that we saw back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. When they pop out, when they're giving birth, it made me think of the Mogwai and Gremlins.
For sure.
But I guess that was fine. The interiors of the ship, this is what I wish the first 2 seasons of Discovery looked like. I always said that I thought Discovery was too sterile, that it needed more color. I wish that we had more colorful uniforms, and just like the way that these sets are self-lit. And I'm sure they're just redressing Discovery sets, so they easily could have done this.
Yeah, I will agree with you on most of that stuff. I was like visually it looks good.
We have a Trill crew member, so that's...
Yep.
Man, the Trills are getting a lot of attention lately.
Yeah, but none of that has anything to do with the writing and the story. They, I mean, just on a basic level, I guess I didn't need to know the secret origin of Tribbles.
Yeah. We kind of had an origin in the animated series, where it's like, they came from a planet that had the Gomer, was, I believe, the name of the Tribble predator that would eat the Tribbles.
I thought... Glommer.
Yeah. And when you take the Tribbles off of their planet, where they don't have the predators, they reproduce, they get out of control. But they evolved in a habitat where the predator species keeps their population in check.
Yeah. That was a fine explanation for me. Didn't need anything else, but I know they wanted to do a goofy episode with it, and
it bothers me that they reproduce without eating. Like, how can all this mass be generated like this? Like, it's dumb. It's dumb, hokey, bad sci-fi science.
I mean, arguably they have always done that. That's been
this is a little worse, though.
Yeah, because you actually see them like launching out like so frequently in this. I guess by doing that visual, it kind of.
What about when the guy is like vacuuming the Tribbles? And it's like, what are you going to do with those? Like, there's more than can fit in your backpack. You're vacuuming into.
So again, I know it's a comedy episode, but this is a ship of scientists, and in the end, before long, they are running around with like phaser rifles. I guess just stunning them, maybe killing them.
No, they're stunning them.
They're stunning them, and I was like,
they should have been disintegrating them though, so they could like clear up some space, right?
If they had to resort to that, even for a comedy episode, I think I would have liked at least a token sense that they tried to do some Star Trek super science in it.
The 15-minute format comes into play, and
they can pick and choose what they show. They could have done any of that. They didn't have to. And you can do a lot in 15 minutes if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a format that a lot of Star Trek's greatest strengths don't play too well.
That's generally true.
I do want short treks to get better, because I think it is a really cool experiment, and because they are getting more ambitious with this season, and we're doing animated stuff, we're doing some Picard era stuff. I want them to get better, because like I said earlier, it's just like this is my least favorite Star Trek show right now, and. I think that there are cool opportunities with this anthology format. That they haven't really, like the mud episode is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, it was a tightly done story. One thing that kind of concerned me is that I suddenly wondered if this is going to be the vibe of the lower decks. Kind of this sort of goofiness, but with enough Trek continuity thrown in that from my mind it's going to be maddening, because all this formal Trek continuity, and again all the articles that everybody will be subsequently referencing on either Memory Alpha or in various Trek Bibles, is going to have all this ludicrous shit.
Now, Dave, you should remind everyone that you're very skeptical of lower decks.
Absolutely.
Probably more so after watching this.
Yes, but even though I know that there's no official link between this and that one.
Yeah, and actually what I know about Mike McMahon, and from what he said, and from after like seeing him and his staff of writers in Vegas, they are going to be taking a pretty different approach from this, I think. There might be some overlap, like having a smaller ship, where maybe not everyone is like the best of the best on like the flagship of the Federation.
Right.
There might be some of that, but I think the level of jokes that that they're going to be writing, just from what he's done on Rick and Morty and stuff like that, I think is going to be a little bit of a smarter type of comedy, which still might rub you the wrong way, because I know you don't really want that in Star Trek at all. But comedy is a real difficult balancing act for me, and I honestly didn't like a lot of the humor on TNG growing up. I've warmed to it more now, and I've seen stuff that I've liked. You can do it in Star Trek. I think TOS and DS9 do it better than anyone.
TOS is my favorite, and what I've seen of DS9 has been very good.
Those are also the two best Star Trek shows ever made.
Fair enough.
That will probably ever be made, in my opinion. But also, I know Mike McMahon is a big continuity guy. He said that all of his writers are kind of required to
know their shit.
Either know it going into, or be putting in an effort to know it.
Yeah.
So there's definitely going to be some I think continuity connections with Lower Decks. But I'm thinking the comedy is going to be smarter. So maybe you'll like it.
It's possible. I have to bring up one last thing.
We got to talk about did you want to get into the post-credit scene, or save that?
Save that for just a second. Okay. There's a scene at the end where she's before some sort of Federation. I don't want to say tribunal, but it's like a
debriefing.
A debriefing, yeah, with about 5 or 6 higher ups from Starfleet. I said Federation, Starfleet, and they're kind of dressing her down, and it's leading up to a punchline. But even so, it rubbed me the wrong way, in a way that surely was not intended. She seemed like a notable, not the first female captain on the Star Trek Discovery, but a notable first captain, female captain, is about to take all this heat for this idiot guy under her charge, and is being dressed down by a bunch of superiors who clearly are not really open to her thoughts initially, and are mostly guys. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It felt a little bit creepy and almost demeaning. Not intended, just how it came off.
But the scene ends with her
she's like, he's an idiot.
Yeah.
They're like, can you explain this? And they did make out all this horrible stuff happened from it. I mean, theoretically, she should be blamed, except this guy was such a scumbag. The end scene is goofy.
The post-credit scene.
In fact, I didn't even know it, because it happens after all the logos and stuff. I stopped.
It's at the very, very end.
So, Father, you want to go ahead and describe?
Sure. So it's very weird, because it kind of starts off as it's the tracking is adjusting on a VCR.
Right. Not standard viewing technology in the 23rd century.
Or now.
Right.
But
it does fit what's about to come out.
Yeah, then it's playing a commercial, but it's a commercial from the 80s or 90s for breakfast cereal, which often had an animated mascot superimposed into live action footage, which I kind of had forgotten was a thing, but
right.
was totally a thing.
Yeah.
That
Raisin Bran would have the little sun from Raisin Bran come out, or Lucky Charms.
Or Honey Nut Cheerios had the bee.
Yeah.
Or anything that if you're, I guess, over 2025, you would remember.
I bet they're still around. They're still selling breakfast.
I don't know. I don't see many cereal commercials, but the idea is that it's a cereal that you can never run out of, because the tribbles are always reproducing. So you have the mom in a Starfleet uniform pouring the box of tribbles into these bowls for these 2 girls.
Yep.
That. And they just never stop coming out, and the kids have such a fun time eating them. And they're available in 3 flavors. You have the original Hairy Berry and Spicy Ranch. I want the Spicy Ranch just because it had a cool cowboy tribble on the box. So I would buy it just because the box art looked cool. It probably tastes I don't know, because it's not cereal, it's meat.
Right.
So Spicy Ranch with your meat.
I mean, no matter what, you're getting fur in your teeth.
How do you get hairy berry if it's if it's a meat product? It's berry and hairy. I don't know. None of these actually sound appetizing.
They may not be.
And they're pregnant with flavor.
Yes, they're pregnant with flavor. It was really ridiculous. It is not a normal Star Trek sense of humor, but it is a pretty standard Saturday Night Live sort of commercial spoof sense of humor. Yeah. And I thought it worked well enough on those merits. And honestly, I think I would have liked the whole episode's premise had it come about through weird spoofs like that.
It was
that
just
were clearly not
non-canon.
If it was not even remotely close to canon.
Huh.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it kind of seems like a waste of a short trek.
Yeah. I don't think I would have approached this story at all. Actually, I think a story that had tribbles in it would have been fine. I just wouldn't have done anything remotely close to this one.
Well, I don't like the mentality of, it's not as cool as what I was hoping it might be when I saw the trailer, so I don't like it. But this isn't as cool as the idea of what I thought it might be when I saw the trailer.
Yeah, you thought it was kind of like a tribble horror, right?
Yes, I thought it was going to be like tribbles get altered from maybe like a mad scientist type guy, which
become carnivorous,
and that's why even when I was watching this, I thought that might be the case because Pike says, they'll eat you alive. It's like, they're foreshadowing the violent tribbles.
And when they're doing their montage of tribbles like overrunning whole rooms and people getting pressed up against walls, there's a woman who's like getting covered in and does scream in like 1950s horror movie style.
We know that they save her because there's only one casualty.
Right. But it's filmed to look like a 1950s monster has
and it was in the trailer.
Right. So sadly I think I would have been more open to that weirdo idea of like kind of it would have even been appropriate for October, which is when it hit, to do a weird kind of tribble horror story. I think I would have been happier with that. Somebody who had done some genetic experimentation on them to try and turn them into weapons. I think it probably would have been funny to have him turn out to be like devoured by his own creations or something like that. And,
a just dessert.
Yeah. Oh, nice on multiple levels. So yes, that would have been better than what we got. For me, nearly anything would have been better than what we got.
Would you like to see Lucero again, though?
She'd remind me of this episode. I liked the character until they put her in a story I hated.
Well, maybe...
Yes, I would like to see Lucero again.
Yeah, I would too.
If they could just kind of do one of those things where they just show her like in charge of another science vessel, and they just kind of very, very lightly reference this, and she was like, "Yeah, I had it was a bit of a mess because of on the previous ship, but things have been going fine ever since, and here's what the new plot is." That would be fun. That'd be fun.
Yeah. I'm just going to throw out one little trivial detail that I liked and one little trivial detail that I disliked.
Yep.
I liked when they're in the mess hall and they're getting food out of the synthesizer.
Yep.
It has like a very like computerized voice and it's like one large salad or something like that. And it did sound a little bit more like Magel's voice on TOS as the ship's computer. However, I disliked when they refer to the Cabot as a Cabot-class ship when it's actually a pre-established Star Trek ship. I think it's called the McGee class. I actually have the Eagle Moss of that ship. It's like
is it one of the ones showing on the thing right behind us?
Up there somewhere if you're watching us on video.
One of these, or possibly a shelf up above that you can't see.
Yeah, I think it is up above.
Sorry.
You can't see it.
But look it up online.
If you're watching the video, there's a picture of the McGee class ship right here.
Yeah. They mistakenly called the name of the ship the class of the ship. Am I getting that right? Not a high level of priority for me.
That's a rookie goof, though, if you're going to be a Star Trek writer.
It's a rookie goof, and because I already hate the episode, I fucking hate that they got the McGee wrong. I'm with you on this one, Fatheree. I'm ready to get behind it.
But I like I said, I liked the look of the Cabot, the sets, uniforms, even like some of the triple stuff that's seen of like where it's panning from the outside and you can see through the windows, like just like the giant wave of tribbles moving across the decks.
They clearly wanted to play around with a lot of almost like Looney Tunes cartoonish visuals, and I was not there to play along with them. But I do think
you checked out early.
I do think visually, like that, like. If you were enjoying that, they did a good job. Funny shots of some of the same stuff they did of like tribbles kind of almost pouring like a tide. The final thing where it engulfs the guy is visually very well done.
But that actually bugged me because I thought it was too weird when he's just standing there being weird and dumb. And
yeah, he's like walking around in his tidy whities and stuff like that.
Well, not at that moment, but I didn't mind when he woke up to the red alert and goes out in the corridor in his underwear. That felt like a thing that could happen.
Yeah,
and it's visually funny. That didn't bother me, but it did bother me when he's just like, "I'm not dumb, but I'm going to stand here and die like a dumb person."
Yeah, He reminded me a little bit of the Pockleds in that moment, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. Maybe they got some of his DNA, too. Maybe they ate some of these tribbles. One time I did laugh out loud, though, and it's like a type of humor that I like that's like kind of subtle, and you might even overlook it. But it's when everyone is on the ship is walking around picking up the tribbles, and they're putting them all in like this little containers.
Yeah.
But Edward is putting them in like a big pot, like he's gonna boil them or something.
Jesus, like a crawfish boil.
Yeah,
that's messed up.
Yeah, that was silly, but it made me laugh out loud, so I like it.
You know what I would have accepted this story in? One of those weak issues from the IDW anthology Star Trek comics, where I could have just been like, oh man, I like 2 of the stories in this issue, and this one sucked. Good thing I'll never hear from it again.
The Star Trek Waypoint comics?
Yeah, Waypoint.
Yeah.
I actually overall like those most of the time, but they get a few
weird.
stickers.
This is definitely weird enough to be in there, because those are all weird.
Yeah.
But...
Anyway, I'm going to cry myself to sleep tonight because of this episode, and just hope that I'm able to get enthusiasm for Star Trek once again.
Well, maybe Short Treks will have a winner for you next month.
We'll know in a week. If not, I will enjoy vivisecting it, just like Edward would with a delightful meaty tribble. Oh, but I think before we go, we had a few viewers who had chimed in, listeners on Twitter and some other social media, just to say what they thought about these 2 episodes collectively right before we did this. So any comments we wanna read, respond to, or just hear out?
Sure, yeah. So we had some reactions from Twitter. This is in regards to both episodes of Short Treks this season.
So Q&A and the Trouble with Edward?
And Trekkie Rob says, loved them. Great to see more of Number One. Loved Edward, the USS Cabot, the Tribbles, and Captain Lucero.
All right, so somebody is on board. Somebody they have at least one victim. No, I'm glad he liked it. Glad he liked it.
Our good friend PJ Boat Trek said, Q&A wasn't nearly as fun to watch as The Trouble with Edward. I love that they did a straight-up goofball comedy that actually made me laugh.
Are you okay, PJ? I'm being a jerk.
Not everyone's going to hate this as much as you, Dave.
I know, I'm being a jerk.
Some people like to laugh.
I'm being a jerk like Edward. It's my homage to my new favorite character.
Yeah, well, keep your DNA to yourself. Heather Ray says, I liked both, but Q&A is my favorite. Where's the Pike series?
I agree with all of the things in that. Q&A, despite some issues, I had stuff that I definitely liked. Would love to see a Pike series.
And like I said, even though I thought Trouble of Edward had some stupid stuff in it, still had a little bit better time than with Q&A. Didn't love or hate either one, but...
You get the Spock raised eyebrow from me.
Word. Thad writes, I enjoyed Q&A, but the humor in The Trouble with Edward didn't really land for me.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so there's someone on the same page as you, Dave.
It's the first time ever, but I'll take it.
James Mount says, best episode so far. Excellent.
Interesting. I will be curious to see what the overall view of these is. You know, we're seeing a little slice of readership, viewership here, or listenership. But I'll be curious to see what people are overall thinking. Overall good? Overall bad? We'll find out.
I would have to put the Saru episode and the Mud episode over both of these, I believe. That's just me.
I definitely would. I think I would actually put... so far, I would take all of the ones in season 1 over all of these.
Over both of these?
Yeah.
I wouldn't take the Tilly one, and maybe not Calypso.
Oh, yeah. No, I think Calypso was well done, even if I did think it was a bit of out of place. And I like the Tilly episode in spite of kind of being very contrived. Anything else?
And finally, last but not least, Leslie E. Owen writes, I liked they used Bing Crosby singing Johnny Appleseed. Other than that, disappointing and juvenile. This is clearly talking about The Trouble with Edward, which...
They had that was the montage when they were cleaning them up?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize that as Crosby, but I can definitely hear it now.
That's a good catch. That's a good catch, yeah. I think... A
bit of a connection with Tasha Yar being played by Bing Crosby's granddaughter, Denise Crosby.
Yep. They should have had a ghostly image of Tasha Yar waving from the great beyond.
If you're watching the video right now, here's a picture of me and Denise Crosby together in Mexico.
Nice.
If you're not watching the video, you should, and then you can see that. But yeah, that's all we have to report on the 2 current short treks of Star Trek Short Trek Season 2. We will be back in a month. November 17th, we'll be discussing the episode Ask Not, which is going to drop on November 14th.
And what's this one going to be about, or do we know?
No one is really sure as far as I know.
Does that mean it's going to be the animated one?
No, we're expecting this to be more Pike and Enterprise type stuff.
Okay.
And then after this, we get into the animation and the Picard prequel stuff. But yeah, let us know what you thought about these 2 short treks, and come back in November to talk about the next one with us. And until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all. Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of Tex-Trek. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter at TXTrek, or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fathereeactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.